So hello friends, I welcome you all to my channel. So yeah, I have got request for giving you rapid revision kind of classes for the upcoming NEET exam. So we will try to cover as much topics as possible in zoology and some part of botany also, whichever is possible for me to take in this time, in the easiest format, in the quickest way possible for the upcoming NEET exam. So you can consider this as a revision, and I actually hope that you have already done the NCERT once, at least once, isn't it? I'm presuming that you have at least done the NCERT once before attending this class. If you have done it before, or if you are on the process of reading it in the first time or second time, you can do the classes once you have read it at least once. Okay, so if you see this video and if you want to watch this, I will suggest you to just go through the topic once and then attend this video, and then again after this end of this video again go back and read the NCERT textbook once again. So that will make the topic very much clearer. So I'll be a bit fast in this particular topic, and if you want me to slow down, or if you want me to make certain changes, make certain variations in the way I'm teaching in this particular format, do let me know in the comment box below. I will just modify all these kind of classes that will be coming in the right appropriate manner that is most feasible for you. Thank you, and I hope you will enjoy this particular lecture. So now we'll discuss a very expansive topic, obviously, but that can be completed within a short span of time if we are having the right approach towards this topic, and that is skeletal system. So we need to know all the bones that are there and a basic idea of the joints that are there inside the human body. So obviously, when I talk about skeletal system, if we try to revise the topic of skeletal system from that particular chapter, see, basically this is composed of your connective tissues, okay, and these connective tissues, if you know the classification from the topic of structural organization: loose, dense, specialized, and here comes specialized connective tissues, okay, and these are your bones, okay, and obviously along with the bones we are having one more important connective tissue, and that is cartilage. Altogether, you are having 206 bones in the adulthood. Okay, when you are a child, the number of bones are different, but when you are an adult, the number of bones are 206. So this is what we need to focus on, and we need to understand these things in the great detail possible. So cartilage is specialized. Cartilage is there, and then you have bones. So both bones and cartilages are coming under the category of specialized connective tissue. Now the point that you are supposed to remember is that you have bone here and you have a cartilage here. Few points are there in the NCERT textbook which we will be mentioning here. See, bone, if you talk about the matrix of the bone, now what is matrix, what are the cells which are there, all these things can be discussed in the topic of structural organization. Remember that you are having a tissue, isn't it? Tissue means it is a group of cells which are, which perform a common function in a way. So basically, when you have a tissue here, these cells are arranged, these cells are resting in a particular substance, and this area, this substance in which the cells are present, is called by the name of matrix. In the bone, you are having a lot of cells, osteocytes. Osteocyte is the name of the cells which are there inside the bone. We'll be discussing all these in the structural organization of animals. But the point is, when you talk about the bone, these cells are there inside the matrix. What else do you have in the bone other than the cells? That is the matrix. In cartilage also you are having a matrix, and the cells are called by the name of chondrocytes. Chondrocytes. The cells are chondrocytes. The cells of the bone are called by the name of osteocytes. So the osteocytes are arranged in the bone matrix. Chondrocytes are arranged in the cartilage matrix. Now this matrix of the bone is hard. Obviously, the matrix of the bone is hard, and while the matrix of the cartilage is soft, and the word used is pliable. You can bend it, isn't it? Pliable. You can just touch your ear pin over here, and you can just flex it here in this way, isn't it? It is very much flexible. So obviously that is why we call it as pliable structures. And the cartilage matrix is very much soft. It is pliable, and it contains the salt. Which salt is present inside the cartilage matrix? The salt is chondroitin. Okay, so the moment you hear the word chondro, this much part, this signifies cartilage. Here also, isn't it? You see that chondrocytes, Cartilage and cyte means cell, isn't it? Osteo means bone and cyte means cell, obviously. So chondroitin is the name of the salt which is there inside the cartilage matrix, which is a very commonly asked question. So this is a very important question that they can ask you. Okay, so the difference between the matrix is also important. Now let us understand how to classify the bones, or you can even call it as the skeleton. You need to classify this. These are all the basic ideas which are there in the introductory part of the topic, right? So you will be classifying the skeleton in this format. You are supposed to do that, and if you do that, you have two categories here. The first category is the axial skeleton, and the second category is the appendicular skeleton. So the total number of bone is 206. Out of this, 80 bones are there in the axial. Okay, and here you are having obviously 126 bones. So this is how you are classifying the total bones here. You can even divide into axial skeleton, and the other one is appendicular skeleton. Now the point is, axial skeleton forms the axis of the body. It forms the axis of the body. This is my axis. So it contains, obviously, if you talk about my axis, I have a skull here. Okay, here I have a skull. I have a sternum, the breastbone, the center of the chest here, where whatever is the bone that is there in the center of the chest to which the ribs are attached. This is called by the name of sternum. You have the ribs also. Okay, you have the vertebrae also. Okay, so the skull, sternum, ribs and vertebrae. Skull, sternum, ribs and vertebrae. These are the four bones, four sets of bones, isn't it? This is not a single bone. These are sets of bone. Okay, isn't it? So there are four sets of bone here. Remember this word. There are four sets. Okay, in the term axis, A-X-I-S, there are four letters here. Okay, and the number of bones here, this is a multiple of 4. Right, while 126 is not a multiple of 4. In this way you can divide this and you can remember the axial and appendicular skeleton. Right, whatever other bones are there, the rest of the bones which are there inside the human body, these come under the appendicular skeleton. Okay, so this is the basic idea that you are supposed to have. So I'm not going into great detail, I'm not explaining much because this is a revision kind of a video. Okay guys, so this is our first set of bone. Okay, and you know the number of ribs. First of all, this is the first thing that you need to understand here. The number of ribs are 12 plus 12. If you see on this side, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. The same 12 is there on the other side, and therefore you have 24 ribs, or you will call it as 12 pairs of ribs, isn't it? One pair of 12 and the other one is also there. So 12 pairs of ribs are there, right? And the ribs are numbered as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. This is how the point is. Okay, now the point is that all the ribs are having an attachment to the vertebrae. So all ribs are attached to the vertebrae. Okay, this is a very important point. All the ribs are attached to the vertebrae behind, posteriorly. On back side of my body, all my ribs are attached to the vertebrae. But are all the ribs attached to the sternum? That is my question. This is the sternum, isn't it? This is the sternum. And this is the breastbone. This is sternum. That means the centralmost bone over here in the chest. That is the sternum. So are all my ribs attached to the sternum? No. Only most of them are attached, but there are certain other ribs like the 11th and the 12th ribs which are not attached to the sternum. That is the point. So all ribs are attached to the vertebrae, but not all ribs are attached to the sternum. Remember this very carefully. Okay, you should not get confused with this. All ribs are attached to the vertebrae, but not all ribs are attached to the sternum. Okay, so that is how we will be classifying the ribs as true ribs, false ribs, floating ribs. True ribs simply means that it is true. That means it is attached behind with the vertebrae, and in the front side it is attached with the sternum. It is attached to the vertebrae posteriorly, it is attached to the sternum anteriorly. The first 7 ribs, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So 1 to 7 ribs are attached to the vertebrae behind and the sternum anteriorly. So they are called by the name of true ribs. So it is attached to the vertebrae behind and the sternum anteriorly. So you will call them as the vertebro-sternal ribs based on their attachment. Vertebro behind it is attached to the vertebra and in the front side it is attached to the sternum. So they are called by the name of vertebro-sternal ribs. In this way also they can ask you the question. Name the vertebro-sternal ribs. First 7 ribs. Now 8, 9 and 10. This one and this one. All ribs are attached to the vertebrae. So they are also coming from the vertebrae. But coming here, they are joining together, isn't it? They are joining together and then they are attaching to the 7th cartilage. See, first of all, you need to understand that this particular part is the bone. When it comes over here, it is joining with a cartilage and it is the cartilage which is attaching to the sternum. That is the actual thing that is happening here. If you talk about the second rib, it comes over here like this and it ends over here, the bone ends over here and this part is the cartilage. So the cartilage is what is actually attaching the bone, the rib to the sternum. But in case of 8, 9 and 10th rib, in case of 8th, 9th and 10th rib, their cartilages are joining together, isn't it? This is the 8th, 9th and 10th cartilage that I am just marking here. 10th, 9th and 8th cartilage, they are joining with the 7th cartilage. So these are 8, 9 and 10th ribs. What do? They are joining with the cartilage of the 7th rib. They are joining with the 7th cartilage. They are joining together to the 7th cartilage or they are joining to the cartilage of the 7th rib. And thus they are attached to the sternum, isn't it? They are not directly attached. If you talk about this bone, this is coming here and through its own cartilage it is attaching here. But in the case of 8, 9 and 10, they are joining together, then they are joining towards the 7th and through that they are attaching to the sternum. So it is attached to the vertebrae posteriorly behind, but anteriorly in the front side they are attached to the cartilage and not the sternum actually. So that is why they are called as vertebrochondral. Vertebrochondral. Chondral means cartilage. They are attached to the vertebrae behind and in the front side they are attached to the 7th cartilage. They are attached to 7th cartilage. In other words, cartilage of the 7th rib. So that is why we call them as vertebrochondral. If you remember, I told you that whenever we talk about the word chondral, it simply means it is the cartilage. Chondrocyte, the site of the cartilage. Chondrocyte, the site of the cartilage. Site means cell. The cell of the cartilage is called as chondrocyte. Chondroitin is the salt in cartilage. Vertebrochondral, on the back side it is attached to the vertebra. On the front side it is attached to the cartilage of the 7th rib or the 7th cartilage. And the last 2 ribs, 11th and the 12th, they are floating. Of course it is attached to the vertebrae. All ribs are attached to the vertebrae, but not all ribs are attached to the sternum. So this is the 11th and 12th rib. Very, very important question. They can ask you this directly. Name the floating ribs. Name the true ribs. Name the false ribs. What are vertebrochondral ribs? What are vertebrochondral ribs? What are floating ribs? And floating ribs are so called because they are attached to the vertebrae behind, but anteriorly in the front side it is not attached to any structure. It is simply hanging there. There is no attachment anteriorly. So that is why it is called by the name of floating rib. It is just floating. But behind it is attached obviously to the vertebrae. Remember, all ribs are attached to the vertebrae. So these are all that you need to know about the floating ribs. Now these floating ribs are nearly very much close to the kidney. So if you talk about kidney here, my kidney will be lying somewhere like this. Okay, on this side also the kidney is lying. And this comes the ureter. Okay, this is how the ureter arises. So this is how the kidney is arranged. And this 11th and 12th ribs are very close to the kidney. So that is why you can call them as the renal ribs. So the other name for floating ribs or the 11th and 12th ribs is the renal ribs. Okay, the other name is the renal rib. Fine. So these are all the few things that you are supposed to understand. The next point that you are supposed to know, let me clear this much things over here. We need to understand the parts of the sternum. One is this part, one is this part, and the other one is this small process-like structure which is there. Okay, so this part that I am just marking here, this much part is called by the name of manubrium. Okay, now this much part this is called as the body, and this small triangular extension that you see over here, this thing is called by the name of xiphoid process. Okay, so manubrium, body, and xiphoid process. I hope you are getting those enlisted part over here. I hope you are just understanding how I have divided this. This upper part is called as manubrium. To this, the first rib is attaching. So the first rib is attaching, and even the clavicle attaches to the manubrium. Okay, here comes the clavicle, and the clavicle is attaching here. This bone, shoulder bone, right? So clavicle and the first rib is attaching to the manubrium. All the other ribs are attached to the body, and the small triangular projection is called by the name of xiphoid process, which is the most most below portion, or the most downstream portion of the sternum. Isn't it? So these are the three parts of the sternum. So you are supposed to remember the three parts of the sternum or the breastbone. Right? See this question. The number of true ribs in the man. True ribs in man. How much is that? True is first 7 ribs. So you have 7 pairs. On one side you have 7. On the other side also you have 7. So 7 into 2 is 14. And that is the answer. Obviously. So for this question, the correct answer is option 4th. Okay. Now let us go to one more question that I have selected here. Right. So which of the following are true about the human ribs? The first 7 pairs of ribs articulate with the sternum ventrally and the vertebrae dorsally. Dorsally means behind. Ventral is my ventral part. That is my dorsal part. Okay. So yes, first 7 pairs. These are the true ribs. Okay. Vertebrosternal. See, vertebrosternal ribs. That is why they are called by the name of true ribs. First 7. Is it correct? Yes, it is. Axial skeleton comprises of 90 bones. No, I don't agree with this. It should be 80 bones. I told you axis. The word axis has 4 letters. There are 4 sets of bone: skull, sternum, ribs, and vertebrae. And 80 is the multiple of 4. So obviously it is not 90 but 80 here. The true ribs are attached to the sternum with the help of hyaline cartilage. Yes, this is a correct answer. This is a correct statement. See, the point that I would like to mark here is that we have discussed just now that these blue things are cartilage, isn't it? So this is a cartilage. This is a cartilage, and this is also a cartilage. So these are all the cartilaginous parts. Okay. Now these cartilages are hyaline cartilage. What are the types of cartilage that you know? Basically you have 3 types of cartilages: hyaline cartilage, elastic cartilage, and fibrous cartilage. So basically you are supposed to know the 3 types of cartilage in the topic of structural organization. So this is hyaline cartilage. That is why you are having a bluish tinge to it. Okay. Normally hyaline cartilage under microscope it looks very much blue. So this is a hyaline cartilage. Remember this point very carefully. They might ask you, what is this particular costochondral cartilage? Costochondral, that means the rib cage, the cartilage associated with the rib cage. So what type of cartilage is it? It is hyaline cartilage, not elastic, not fibro cartilage. It is not a fibrous cartilage. It is not an elastic cartilage. Okay, it is an hyaline cartilage. Even that is a correct sentence. Right? Now there are 2 pairs of vertebrochondral ribs. These are the false ribs, isn't it? These are the false ribs. Vertebrochondral. It is attached to the vertebrae posteriorly, and in the front side it is attached to the chondrum or the cartilage. Now how many are there? 8, 9 and 10. So there should be 3 pairs. There should be 3 pairs of vertebral condyles. So this is it correct? No. So option B and C are correct. So I will go with option 3. No, I am wrong. So that means option A and C are correct. So obviously my answer is option 2. Right? Let's go to the next concept now. Now we will talk about the vertebrae. Okay, this is the next thing, and you are supposed to know very few things over here. First of all, we need to know the formula here, vertebral formula. See the number of vertebrae in each region. So the vertebrae can be divided as the cervical in the neck, thoracic in the chest, lumbar behind the abdomen, then you have the sacrum and coccyx. Tailbone, isn't it? This is the tailbone. Okay. So obviously we are supposed to know the number of vertebrae, individual vertebrae in each of these levels. You have C7, 7 cervical vertebrae, 12 thoracic vertebrae, lumbar 5, sacral 5 and coccygeal 4. Okay, C70, 12, lumbar 5, sacral 5, coccygeal 4. This is the vertebral formula. You are supposed to remember this. Right? So here you have 7 vertebrae, here you have 12, here just 5 are there, sacrum 5 are there and coccyx 4 are there. The point is, sacral 5 of these are together fused to form a single bone that is called as the sacrum. Okay, so the tailbone as such you will get it as a single piece. Okay, you will get it as a single piece, and if you carefully look on that particular single piece, you will see that there are 5 bones which are fused, and for mentioning that it is fused, we are mentioning it in this particular bracket format. And this coccyx is a very small bone. You will get it as a very small piece like this, just a small piece at the tip of the sacrum. Here this very small piece is called as the coccyx. Okay, and this will be in turn made by 4 bones in this particular way. Very small piece which is made up of 4 plates of bone, and they will be fused, and to denote fusion we are putting it under brackets. So sacrum and coccyx, these two things are fused. Understand? Okay, fine. So this is all that you're supposed to know, and you have vertebrae. It will look something like this. If you take the individual vertebrae and if you try opening this, each and every individual vertebrae will look like this. Most of them will look like this. This is the typical one, and this structure is called as the neural canal. Neural canal. And if you keep all these vertebrae together, the neural canal will be there in the center, through which the spinal cord comes from the base of the skull. So the medulla oblongata will continue as the spinal cord, right, through the foramen magnum, which is there in the base of the skull. So this is the point here. So neural canal is there in the spinal cord, in the vertebral column, through which the spinal cord is coming like this. So that is the point. You just need to know the functions also. Coming to the functions of the spinal cord, it's very simple. Functions of the vertebral column, it's very simple. Just 3 points are there. First of all, it protects the spinal cord, isn't it? This is something that everybody knows. See, spinal cord is going through this particular bony framework. You have a bone protection for the spinal cord with the help of vertebrae. So, spinal cord protection is one thing. Okay. Another thing is, imagine that this is your whole skull. The whole skull is there. It has a lot of things. It has the brain, it has the sense organs, eye, ear, everything is there. This is actually supported by this whole big range of vertebrae which forms a column. So the skull is here, and the skull is supported by the vertebral column like this. Now this is how the whole thing is arranged. So it supports the skull. And the content inside, isn't it? And the third point is that it is serving as an attachment for the whole vertebral column is the attachment for ribs. We just discussed that all the ribs, first you see the whole ribs, isn't it? All the 12 ribs are attached to the ribs, attached to the vertebrae posteriorly, and most of them are attached to the sternum anteriorly, if not all, isn't it? So that is how the things are there, and as well as the muscles of the back. There are many muscles of the back that you will learn in the first year of MBBS. So all these back muscles are attached into the vertebral column, posteriorly behind, isn't it? So these are all the 3 important functions. The first vertebrae is called as atlas, and second is called as axis. Okay, these are all the things that you're supposed to know. So with that, we are coming to the end of this discussion. Next one will be the next set of bones. So I would always recommend you to spend more time for concepts like this, and yes, we are going to talk about the most trickiest part here, and that is the human skull. So this is the skull, isn't it? And it has a lot of things. So we are supposed to know the bony framework of the skull, and I mean bony framework of your head, isn't it? And that is the skull. And therefore the skull can be divided into two parts. One is that part which covers the brain. Okay, this is the part of my skull which covers the brain, and this is my face, isn't it? So you can divide this into cranial bone, cranium. That means this covers the brain. This is the cranium, isn't it? This part is the cranium. And you have facial bones that forms your face. This framework of your face is made by the facial bones. Now this is actually 14 in number, while this is 8 in number. So altogether you are going to have a total of 22 bones inside the skull. Now we'll just enlist the name of the facial bones, and we'll mark those 14. Out of this 14, not all can be seen here. Whatever is there, we will mark these things over here, and that is all that you need to learn. Okay, so face is actually formed by different bones. So think about the face of this particular skull that is seen over here. So here I can see a particular bone that I will be marking now. So this is going to form your nasal bridge, isn't it? This upper part of the nose, this part of the nose, upper 1/3 is formed by the bone, and this part is the cartilage, definitely. Okay, so this is an elastic cartilage, but this upper part is made up of bone. So obviously you will call the first one as the nasal bone. Okay, now you have two nasal bones. So this is 2 in number. Okay, you have one nasal bone over here, the other one over here. They are fused, isn't it? There is a suture in between. So this is how the two nasal bone has been arranged inside the face. So there are two nasal bones. Okay, so this is the nasal bone. Then comes the maxilla. Right, so I would say that this is the maxilla, so it extends all the way till here. This part, whatever I am shading now, is your bone that is called by the name of maxilla. One on this side, one on the other side. So this is what is meant by saying that there are two maxilla on your face. So this is my maxilla, this is also my maxilla. So 1 and 2, two maxilla, right? Third one is the mandible. Okay, so if you have carefully observed your face, you might have seen that there is only one single joint that is moving. Only one bone can move on your face, and that is your mandible. So there is only one single bone over here. Now this is the mandible. This is the mandible. See, this is how the mandible is there. Okay, now this bone is actually a single bone, and that covers your entire face. See, so this extends all the way till this. Right, so this is the bone, and this extends till here. This is a bone that completely extends throughout your face, and that is called by the name of mandible. Right, so there is only one single mandible, but you have two maxilla. So I'll just mark all these things here. This is my maxilla. On the other side there is another one. This is the mandible. So see, this C is the maxilla, remember that, and D is your mandible. Okay, so those were the questions that were asked from this particular image. Now, yeah, once you have done with mandible and maxilla, let us talk about the next bone, that is your zygomatic. Okay, so remember that zygomatic bone are also 2 in number, one on this side, one on the other side. Now this is the bone that gives a very good symmetry to your face. It contributes to the beauty of your face, and obviously this is what I'm talking about. This particular bone that you can see over here is the zygomatic bone. Right, so you have this zygomatic over this side, this projection that you can see just on the side of your orbit, isn't it? This is where the zygomatic can be seen. You can even touch this and you can feel the bone. Okay, so this gives a lot of beauty to your face, and this is the beauty contributor for your face. So that is the zygomatic bone. On one on this side, one on the other side, right? So I hope I can just highlight it now. I hope that makes it much more visible now. Right, so this is my zygomatic bone. Fine. Next, one more bone can be seen over here, among those 14 bones, I think one more can be seen over here, and that is this particular structure. Okay, right. Now this bone is called by the name of the lacrimal bone. See, the word lacrimal means you have a lacrimal gland, isn't it? This is where the lacrimal gland is situated. This gland will produce the tears, isn't it? Now, this tear system of the body, like you have a beautiful system within your eyes, associated with your eyes, for the purpose of production, for the purpose of transmission, and for the purpose of drainage. It will produce the tears somewhere, it will pour the tears over the eyes, it will just fill the eye area, and it is drained into your nose. So this particular entire drainage system, some part of that is associated with the lacrimal bone. So that is why, see, lacrimal, the word is associated with tears. So it has something to do with certain structures which are associated with the tear production and tear storage. So that is why you are saying this bone is lacrimal. Okay, so this is lacrimal bone associated with your tear transport system. In a way, you can say that. Lacrimal, one on this orbit, on the other orbit also you have one more. So this is, I would say, 2 in number, right? So these many are the bones that you can see over this particular image. So these are all the bones that are marked in the NCERT. So you are supposed to remember only these particular bones for your examination. But for the completion's sake, I would just like to tell this. There is something called by the name of inferior nasal concave. Inferior nasal, inside the nose you have a bone. And the next one is vomer bone. And finally, the palatine bone is also there. So palatine, inferior nasal concha, and the vomer bone. Vomer is forming the septum, the nasal septum on the most posterior surface. See, most behind the back side of the nasal septum. This is cartilage, isn't it? If you go deep inside, that is formed by the vomer bone. Okay, you will not be seeing such a bone in any of the images in your NCERT. So no need to remember these things. So at least these things are what you are supposed to remember here. Just know the location of these bones in that particular image. If they are asking you an image-based question where they are marking a structure like ABCD as in this particular question, and then they are asking you to identify the bone, you should be in a position to do that. So remember only these particular bones because these are the ones that are marked in NCERT. That's enough. Fine. So these are all the facial bones that you are supposed to remember. Now I will just clear the clutter here. This particular things, we don't need it anymore. So I am just clearing these off now. And now we will write the 8 cranial bones, and all of them you will be able to appreciate in this particular image. Now, I hope there aren't any much points to discuss over here. So let us write the other cranial bones. Okay, so the cranial bones are 8 in number. Okay, first one is frontal. Only one bone is there. Next is the parietal. Okay, 2 parietal bones are there. Third one is temporal. Again 2 temporal bones are there. And fourth is occipital. Occipital, there are 2 bones. I mean, there is only one single occipital bone. Okay, fifth is sphenoid, and the 6th one is ethmoid. Okay, so you have one sphenoid and one ethmoid. Okay, now yeah, these are all the very basic things that you are supposed to remember. Now let us talk about each and every individual single bones. The first one is frontal. I hope both can be seen in this particular view. So I will just mark the frontal bone and I will tell you that this is the bone present in the front side of your face. So this is the bone that forms the forehead. So yes, I will write it as forehead and front. So the frontal bone is present in the front. It forms the forehead, and yes, F is there in the frontal bone also. So obviously this is my frontal bone. Now how many frontal bones are there? For that matter, I will request you to just feel over here. Are you seeing 2 bones here? No, it is just a single piece of bone that is covering this entire surface. That's it. Okay, so your forehead is made up of a single bone, and that is the frontal bone. Okay, so it extends till here. Fine. The next one is the parietal bone, and A is your parietal bone. So this is the extent of the parietal bone that I am marking now. So this is the parietal bone. A is the parietal bone. Okay, there are two parietal bones, one on this side, one on the other side. Fine. Next, you have a bone in this particular format. This is a big bone. It extends to the base of your skull, but in this particular image, you are able to see only this particular part of that particular bone, and that is your occipital bone. See, this part of the skull is called by the name of occiput. That particular posterior part, isn't it? This back side of the skull, that is mostly found by this particular bone. Okay. Now the next one is the temporal bone. So whatever is left here, this particular structure that I am marking is the temporal bone. Okay. So this particular area that I have just delineated among this, just I have separated this particular blackish colored structure, and this is your temporal bone. So temporal bone is a bit complicated kind of a bone. It has a lot of structures, and some part of the temporal bone, see, most of the part of temporal bone is lying inside the skull. Inside the skull, you have to cut it and look inside. Only then you will be able to see the temporal bone. So I hope that I can make a better visualization with white color. Yes, temporal bone. Okay, now the next one is sphenoid. Obviously, see, this is the sphenoid. You are seeing a very small part of the sphenoid outside the skull in this particular format. So this is your sphenoid. Okay, yeah, this is your sphenoid. Now what is this particular? This is zygomatic, isn't it? Now this is the sphenoid. So I will just mark sphenoid over here. And the last one was ethmoid, and this ethmoid can be seen, this one, this is the ethmoid bone. Okay. Oh, there's only one sphenoid. It is such a big bone that is covering the entire width. Okay. So here you can see a sphenoid part, and this is also a sphenoid part, but the bone is a single bone. So this part and this part are parts of the same bone. It is not two different things, isn't it? You have a part of sphenoid here, so definitely you will have a part of sphenoid here also, because your face is symmetrical. But this part and this part are the same, part of the same bone itself. Although I said that if temporal bone is this part here, you have a different temporal bone over here, but here you have a sphenoid bone, here also you have a sphenoid bone, but it is a single bone. So it is connected inside. So that is how the sphenoid bone is there. It is a butterfly shaped bone. Okay, and this part is your ethmoid bone. Okay, now what is confusing for you is like the parts of the bone that are there inside the orbit. So this will be very much confusing. So let me make that particular part much more clearer by just erasing all these things, and then I will teach you that particular area specifically. So first of all, see this part, the most interior part within the orbit, most interior within the orbit. So this is your ethmoid bone, right? I hope if I write with this, you will be able to see this is ethmoid. Okay, now with a different color, let me mark this particular area that is more outside compared to the ethmoid, and that is your lacrimal bone. Okay, associated with the tear drainage system. Now last one is this particular bone that is associated with the nose, and that is the nasal bone. Okay, if you go from outside to inside, you will see N, L and E. Does it make a, N, L, E? Okay, does it make a mnemonic something? No, I don't think so, but anyway, yeah, nasal, lacrimal, ethmoidal. You go from outside to inside. Nasal, lacrimal, ethmoidal. If you want to learn in this particular format, it's okay, but otherwise, this is what you are supposed to focus more on, because if they want to confuse you in at least in a practice test or something, this is where they will be focusing. Other things you may get it. Okay, now let us write certain other points about those cranial bones. About the facial bones it's okay, but cranial bones you are supposed to know few more other things. Frontal bone, remember it is in the front side. It is forming the forehead. So with F you will be able to remember it. Parietal bone, nothing is there to remember. Temporal bone, remember that the ear is there inside the temporal bone. Right? Now the next one is the occipital bone. So in occipital bone you have two condyles. Okay, so you have to take the skull and look it from, you know, inferiorly. So if you just take the skull, turn it over and then see the the below portion, the most below portion of this particular skull, most downward area of that particular skull, you will see that there is a small opening in the occipital bone in the base of the skull. If you take it, inverse this and see the base of the skull, you will see that there is a small opening over here, not a small opening, big opening will be there, and on side of this you have two important structures over here. Now this particular opening is your foramen magnum. Okay, so if you just remember what you have learned in the topic of neural control and coordination, you might have remembered that the medulla oblongata comes out through the foramen magnum and it continues through the neural canal in the spinal cord as the neural canal of the vertebral column as the spinal cord. So the medulla oblongata will come out through this, and it will continue as the spinal cord deeper down. On the side of this particular foramen magnum, you have two important condyles. Condyles means certain projections, certain raised surface, a projection that you can see over here. Now these are called by the name of the condyles, occipital condyles. Since it is present on occipital bone, you will call them as the occipital condyles. How will the condyle look like? It's just like a small piece of bone. So it is a projection that you can see on both sides of the foramen magnum. And this will attach with atlas. Atlas is the first vertebrae or the first cervical vertebrae. The very first vertebrae number 1 is atlas. Okay, so it will attach with the atlas. Now that is the importance of occipital condyle. There are two condyles here, so you will call the human skull as the dicondylic skull. Right, now coming to the sphenoid bone. See, there is an important feature which you are supposed to remember here, and with that I hope all this linkage between chapters will be done. Okay, so in sphenoid you might have read in the topic of chemical coordination and integration. In chemical coordination and integration you might have seen the location of pituitary. So where is pituitary located? So pituitary is located in a fossa, not a fossa, like a depression called by the name of sella turcica. Okay, so what I will do is I will just cut my skull in this particular format. So if I just cut the cranial bones in this particular format, if I just take a drill and if I take a grinder and just cut it in this particular format, I just take out the skull and keep it aside. Then I will see the dura mater, then inside you have the arachnoid pia mater. I just remove the dura, then take out the brain, and then I will just keep the brain aside. Then if I look interior through this, then if I am just looking from above into that base of the skull area, I am just taking this out, taking the brain and then looking inside, then I will be seeing the sphenoid bone. You saw a small part of sphenoid over here. So there is a small part of the same sphenoid over here. So they are connected through the skull. Now that part you can see if you look carefully from above. Now on that particular body of the sphenoid, which is the central part of the sphenoid, you have a structure like this. Right, into this particular fossa, there's in this particular depression, the pituitary gland will come and lie in that particular fossa. Now this fossa or this particular structure, this particular depression, not a fossa but this particular depression, is called by the name of sella turcica. So what you need to remember is sella turcica is present on the sphenoid bone. That is enough. Okay, so sella turcica is present in the sphenoid bone. That's all. And it is in the sphenoid bone that the pituitary is lying. So that is all that you need to remember here. Okay. So to end this discussion, I would actually like you to take a look at this particular image. So this is from the topic of neural control and coordination, the topic of ear, isn't it? So they are showing you the cross section of the ear, and obviously this part is the temporal bone. So this was what I was talking about, that ear is inside the temporal bone. So you are seeing this particular bone over here, right? And this is the temporal bone. And if you know that, obviously you will be in a position to understand the concept completely. So most of the ear, if not all, see, this particular portion is made up of cartilage, obviously, right? And whatever lies inside this part is inside the bone, and even this entire structure is within the temporal bone. So from here to here, whatever be the structures, these are inside the temporal bone. Okay, so that is the importance of understanding this concept. Okay, and we have linked the important structures which are there inside the bone with the other topics in which these things are dealt. Now, three important bones are also here. See, we talked about the bones of the cranium, we talked about the bones of the face, but there are three bones that are there inside the ear. In the middle ear specifically, if you see this is one bone, this is the second one, and third one is over here. So you have seen the first bone to be something like this, isn't it? So the first bone looked somewhat like this, and the second one is looking obviously somewhat like this, and the third one is obviously looking somewhat like this, right? So this is your malleus, hammer bone. This is called as hammer. Okay, and this is your incus, and this is the anvil. See, depending on the things that look similar to these bones, these bones are obviously described as malleus looks like a hammer, this looks like this, and this is the stapes, which looks like the stirrup. Okay, so these are three other bones that are not included in the topic of head, isn't it? So you have three bones over here and three bones on the other ear also. So this is your middle ear part. This is your middle ear, and in the middle ear, the structures that are there in the middle ear is this one, malleus, incus, and stapes. Three bones are there. These are called by the name of ear ossicles. Okay, these are also bones. Now this is your inner ear, okay, and this is your external ear. Fine. And this is the tympanic membrane, eardrum, right? Now let us finally end this discussion with one more bone that has been mentioned over here. If you see this particular diagram itself, you might have seen this particular bone, isn't it? This is a U-shaped bone, and this is called by the name of hyoid, right? So hyoid bone, if you want to feel that, you can just extend your neck and try feeling in the upper part of the neck. Here you will be able to appreciate a bone. If you just feel your neck, you will be seeing that there is a bone over there. Now that is your hyoid bone. Okay, just make a mention of this over here. That's it. I'm just making a mention of this. This is mentioned in the textbook, so we are just supposed to know. Now these structures, this is your condyles. Yeah, this condyle that we have just mentioned here, isn't it? That on both sides of the foramen magnum you will be able to see the condyles. So these are all the things that you're supposed to know here. So the rest of the topic of bone we will be covering that in the separate lecture. In the next lecture we'll be covering all those things, and in the third lecture we'll be covering everything related to the muscles, and with that we'll be coming to the end of this particular topic in the easiest way possible. So my aim was to discuss that everything that is there in NCERT with proper emphasis on what is actually required for you at this particular level. I hope you will be able to read this. Now after watching this lecture, do read the textbook again, and I can guarantee that you will be in a position to understand this in a much better way, and you will be in a position to understand the questions that are probable from those kind of areas that we have just now discussed. Okay, thank you.